You've done the work of putting your estate plan together, but eventually you need to make sure that the people you've named will actually work well together. Can they do it? Do they even know who the other players on the team are? Hi, I'm John Strohmeyer with Strohmeyer Law, where we help our clients leave no unfinished business. Now, we help our clients through estate planning and with the hopes that when they pass, their family members will be able to take over, resolve those last bits of work, and then move on with what they've been left behind. It's important to realize, though, that as part of putting together any estate plan, you're picking the people who are going to be in charge. You're putting these people on a team. Will they be able to work well together? Well, let's think about that because it does involve several different groups of people. Specifically, you're thinking about your beneficiaries, the people who are going to receive the assets. Next, you're thinking about the people who are going to be in charge. Who's going to be responsible for gathering your assets, paying any remaining debts, and then transferring over those assets that remain to your beneficiaries. Finally, are there any other advisors that you work with? Because you'll want them to know each other as well as be familiar roughly with the plan so that when it's time for your people, your executors, your trustees to take over, they know who has the background information on what your life is and where you've hidden things. So let's start with your beneficiaries. In a lot of cases, when we see families come in, the plan is usually something along the lines of, for a married couple, leave it all to my spouse, otherwise equal shares for the kids. And in a lot of cases, this will be a good enough plan that will address things for most families. Families may have a few items here or there that could cause some heartache, and we'll want to try and pull that out of them to see, is there anything that they want to think about or anything that might cause a fight? But really, it's the personalities, talking to our clients about their families so that we know who is involved, who is going to be there. Will they actually get along? If one of them does receive an equal share, is that going to be too little for them? Do they expect to receive more? Will one of them cause a problem no matter what happens? So thinking through the people who are going to be involved starts with our beneficiaries. We want to think through how could they make this better and also how could they make this worse? Because if they can make it worse, we're going to want to know that now while you're alive. There are planning options we can think about to make it easier on everybody else involved. Some common bad advice that we hear about is, well, leave them $1 so they're disincentivized to do anything. This is not great advice here in Texas because it will actually give that person a chance to be involved in the probate where they can cause bigger problems. Instead, we'll typically look at how we can have them involved as the beneficiary of a transfer on death account. Why? Whatever asset is in that account will automatically go to them, but it won't give them the right to be involved in the probate proceeding. If there is a revocable management trust, it also won't necessarily make them a beneficiary alongside the other folks who are going to be in charge. In effect, you're transferring that beneficiary share out of the estate and putting it in the hands of the asset custodian, whether it's a bank or a brokerage house, letting them deal with that beneficiary. Why would we do that? By isolating that beneficiary from the rest of the other beneficiaries, the person in charge ends up being that bank or financial house. They'll be responsible for cutting the check or transferring the assets to that beneficiary who still gets the benefit, but doesn't get a chance to cause trouble alongside everybody else. Which then brings us to the second group of people we think about in any plan. Who is going to be in charge? Now, typically we're thinking about your executors, maybe an administrator, depending on what state you're in, your trustees, as well as your agents under your powers of attorney. Now, these jobs take over at different points in time. The agents under the medical power and the agent under a financial or a durable power of attorney, that's a job that would be performed while you, the principal in that relationship, are still alive. So thinking through who's going to make those best decisions for you. The financial agent generally will have broad powers over managing, selling, distributing assets while you're still alive. It's important to think, is this somebody you trust with that power? Typically, I explain to clients, this is something that the person will be empowered to sell the house, sell the car, and run off to Mexico with all the money. Typically, you're not naming people you're worried about doing that, but it is important to think about this being the person who can actually do that. They're going to be given a lot of power. Do you trust them with all of that power? Maybe yes and maybe no. But you want to make sure that you're going to be comfortable with how much power they're being given. The other two jobs, executors and trustees, these are both fiduciary relationships where somebody is in charge of managing assets for somebody else. The executor's job only starts after you have passed on. Typically, that executor is responsible for finding the will, having it admitted to probate, which determines who is going to receive a share of your estate, as well as who is going to be in charge, and then transferring the assets to pay off any remaining debts, and then finally to the beneficiaries who will receive their shares. This is a shorter term job, though the length of the job does depend on how much you have, what sort of mess there is to clean up after you're gone, and basically the state that you live in. Here in Texas, sometimes this can be as short as a few months. Sometimes for more complicated estates, it'll take a few years. Finally, the last broad group of people we think about, trustees. Trustees will receive assets for the benefit of somebody else. They're going to hold and manage those assets so that somebody else is the beneficiary of it. In some cases, you'll have the trustee also be the beneficiary, so they're holding assets for themselves in a way that's separated from their own personal assets. It allows them to protect those assets in trust potentially from being subjected to creditors' claims, future ex-spouses' claims, basically having somebody else come and take those assets. For both the executor and trustee positions, as you consider these, the other things to think about are, do you trust these people with the money? Do you trust them to manage it in such a way that when they're taking care of your beneficiaries, that they will do the right thing, that they will manage it in a forthright and transparent way so that the beneficiaries get what they're entitled to, but don't get so much that it's ruined the purpose of the trust? Alternatively, you want to make sure that they have a good working relationship between the beneficiary and the trustee. Doing so ensures that your wishes ultimately get carried out. The third group we want to think about are your advisors now. This could be your CPA, your financial advisor, a banker, or an insurance salesman. These folks have helped get you where you are now, and if you survive them, it's important that they still be involved in the transferring of your assets. Why? They'll know where things are. They'll be able to help determine what the plan was and help make sure it gets carried out. During your lifetime, you'll rely on these other advisors to make sure that you're kept up to date. And when you do pass, that the plan that is handed off to the next generation is as clean and tidied up as possible. You want to make sure that you've pulled things together, and not only that they know what the plan is, but you have a good listing of where to find those people if something happens. So, as you're pulling your plan together, remember, one of the biggest things that we can do is make sure that we've aligned all of the people in our plans. We're looking at who the beneficiaries are, making sure that they'll be able to receive assets without causing problems. And if they are going to cause problems, minimizing those problems while you're still alive. Next, picking the right people to be in charge, people you trust to take care of your assets in the right way, deal fairly with others, and not cause any future fights with those beneficiaries. Finally, your advisors are there to make sure that what your plan is actually carried out. So as you're pulling your own plan together, remember that these are going to be people who change over time. As you review the rest of your plan, keep in mind that people will come and go, and you want to make sure that your plan accommodates for the right people being involved. Thanks so much for watching. If you've got any questions, make sure and leave them down as a comment below.